before we start, can I ask one favor from everyone? All right, this is regarding the topic what I'm going to talk about. So can we all stand up? And can we start sitting around our letters? So if your name starts with Akanksha A, so you start sitting from here. Please, quickly. So you know where you are sitting. Okay. All right. Can we quickly do it? A, B, C, D.
All the yes.
It is chaos.
It is. All right. So how was that? What was the feeling when you get up? I was like, yeah, I don't want to move. Okay, so a little bit of a definition of what chaos means to me, right? And actually trying to put into law and order, which I should not, but I have. So now I have all A's and all B's and all C's and all these together, right? Am I right? Right? Okay, so I'm a type nerd, and I have a tendency of looking everything or everyone as a person, as a B, C character as well. A chaos from me in a context of typography is either it's very detailed or either it's bizarre. So I have been to a lot of places all around the world, and my hobby is to take pictures of letters wherever I go. And when I see some differences, and then it makes me like, wow, this is a kiosk all around the world where a same country using A so many different times, and you see that same A into another country so many different times, right? So typography on a level of different parts of the world is amazing, and it has an elasticity of going from broad to light to thin to italic or whatsoever. My understanding in a typography composition where different letters sits next to each other is a kiosk itself, because an A, a C, a B, a D, they all have different characters, they all have different space, they all have different details. How they come together and make a fulfilled situation according to the context, that's a kiosk, right? Because unless you do not know that space which revolves around the letter, you can't mix them together well. So that is typography for me. This is me, and I have a tendency to touching everything what I see. So I have to touch a type where I go, and I have to feel it, because if you do not feel a letter, it doesn't go. So my inspiration comes between the space of the letter. As I mentioned before, space is a very important thing to actually highlight the black part or the contrast of that shape. I don't know if you can see the legs properly. There is a space between the legs of the dancer. So if this legs doesn't move properly or doesn't synchronize properly, so the space is unbalanced. This is what happens in typography. The space has to synchronize equally between each letter. So space, which I was talking about before, how I see negative positive space and how letters relate to me according to space. So now if you go out in your environment and if you start looking at the white rather than the black, you will imagine that how a contrast makes a big difference in actually the size, proportion, contrast, balance between all those different characters. So a space is a very important aspect of typography. I get my inspiration from objects as well, and this is one from Amsterdam, and the next one what you're looking at is from one of my professors' place. So he has this amazing art, like I would say a furniture piece of art, and he can actually open all the drawers. perfectly in an awesome angle, and then this is what I relate to it. A typography doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be vertical, doesn't have to be horizontal, doesn't have to be adjacent or a diagonal. A typography in piece inbuilt is a kind of a furniture where you sit. So if you see the space, the letters, how it's been joined together itself is a furniture. This chair, anyone knows about this chair? Okay, very modern, very contemporary, and how this symbol attaches to this. So how a construction of an object can so much be related to a face. This is a letter, Chinese character, and it is built with different modules of a furniture. This is one of my best picture in Bangalore. It's amazing. Look at the harmony. In a context of typography, what I mean to say with this picture is how a balance, a harmony, a proportion, different characteristics of a letter is all inbuilt. What creates a notion, what creates an emotion, and what creates a feeling. All these little aspects of actually maintaining a typography comes from choosing a letter, balancing it out, keeping a harmony between them, and how you present it. So this is my emotional representation of typography in Bangalore. If I go into detail of typography, if I start with a letter form and how a letter form is made, because typography is formed with different letters, and each letter form consists of different angles, different proportions, different let's say mathematical equations. So this O particularly comes from a very well-known designer who had actually made all the characters in a well-proportioned manner on a paper, and then this was converted into a typeface. A geometry of an S, a most complicated character in an alphabet. How do you maintain a proportion of the top counter and the bottom counter? Do they have to be same? Do they have to be big and small? Again, it's an harmony. One very detailed sketch of an artwork. I don't know if you can see. Can you see? It has all lines and everything, like proper multiplications going on the paper. So how a typography, it's not just a design or an art, but sometimes it becomes like a math. So on a paper, you have to have balanced space between the two, let's say a headline or a tagline. So then it's well balanced. If it's not, then it's imbalance. Have you ever seen a letterpress machine? This is a glyph box. So glyph means those little metal swords that sits in the little house. Metal punches were the first one to actually give us the print, and these metal punches were the, how I say it, is like the most harmonious and delicacy treatment to typography did in back on these days, when they used to hand cut all the letters. The case from old history to this history is very different, and we are actually so much privileged by the digital size rather than the letterpress. Otherwise that would be like a chaos, a total chaos. An interesting piece, I really liked it. It's so full of decorative and ornamental. Only reason to do this was to make things pretty. So typography at some point was to just make things pretty. Doesn't have to read, doesn't have to have a legibility, but it has to look pretty. Why? Because back in those days they used to have those manuscripts and Bibles, and mostly for kings and queens, you know, for royals. They are making more sorts of typography context according to them. So this was the era when they started making decorative forms, a detail. This is in Chickpet in the corner somewhere. Very art deco. I really like the letters Varj Mahal and whatever it says in there. Why do I like it? Because it actually balanced the complexity of the politician poster and the art deco. You know, because the person didn't thought, I'm going to keep it on the top, but it balances out. So that's a kiosk, a typography kiosk, what I see in environment. When I took this picture, actually I was looking for this key person. And the moment I asked, okay, where is this chavi wala means key. Straight jaiye, left jaiye, yahan jaiye. So I was like, okay, but this key points this way, it should be here. What happens with this is that science started giving importance to the people, to the business, what they are doing, but doesn't have any context with the person. It's just a business, and that's it. Another interesting picture, this is a very old monogram, I would say. Monogram when started, and mostly for Queen Victoria. They had amazing embellishment. And this is a very complex layering of different letters. There are letters, there is a complexity, and there is a chaos. So chaos is, it didn't have just happen, but the person who started making them, it inbuilt it. So subconsciously it happened, right? The combination of letters. This was the sign in Amsterdam, and it says Golden Temple. It's a juice store. Now there is a guy with a turban and having a yoga pose. So it's an organic place. You have to have a yoga pose and then having juice, selling juice. So where was the chaos? Where's the complexity? I mean, why? Why do you have to show that pose to sell a juice? And then have a golden temple written there. So what does golden temple attach to? The turban, the person, or the design? You see how typography can go complex, letters can go complex. One of my favorite, this is, I was walking on one of the roadsides in London, and they had this tile lettering going on. Again, tile, mosaic, a very complex structure to build something, because mosaic in itself is a pixel, form of a pixel, and doing that pixel, there were letters. So there was a kind of a little law going on somewhere, harmony going on somewhere, with no proportion of stones. If you see, all stones doesn't have balance, doesn't have proportion, but when they combine, they become into an harmony. This is one of my favorite pub in London. So one of the oldest, again this is a mosaic. I know you can't see it from far, but it's on the building, and the mosaic, when you see from far, it looks a harmony. When you go in front, it's been shattered. So that's what the eye was playing, kiosk, with the typography. What does signboards actually resembles you or attaches with you with? Me, letters. When you pass to something, when you read something, what does it connect to you? That connection is not just because you want to go into that store, but that connection, for a fraction of seconds, that letters impresses you to go into that shop. It is very subconsciously. If you can, when you go back and then you just think about for a second that actually it's not the shop. Yes, that was the first thing, but there are letters who have actually approached you towards that shop. I like the structure. I've never seen such an elongated kannada into a sign. Sign painters are the most elaborate thinkers. They like to extend their serif like this and like this. But the moment it comes to convention, the designer is like, it has to have a perfect harmony, it has to have a perfect stroke. Again, there is a chaos between a designer and a sign painter. A freelance letterer would have more freedom in typography than a designer, because they are stick with their conventions. Breaking them is what we risk, and breaking them in an improportionate way, that's a risk. But breaking them into a proportion, into a balance, that's a design. This shop is gone. The whole complex is now gone. It's near MG Road. It's very old, and they are said like heavy bottoms. The letter itself, they are called heavy bottoms because their structure is designed in that way, and they always appealed me. Why? Because it doesn't fit the convention. It has a proportion, an imbalance somewhere where it should not be. Can you see the letter R and the letter B, both have imbalance, but it has a harmony of contrast. So it looks it's balanced. This was outside a temple. It seems like the person didn't know how an ampersand work. I was doing the same thing because I'm a left-hander. So whenever I used to design an ampersand, it used to go this way. And I didn't even realize that one of my teacher came to me saying, Zenab, your ampersand is all right hand side, it has to be left. And then I was, oh shit, I'm doing this wrong all the way. But anyways, I was so happy on that day that there are people like me there in this world. This one, painted by fingers. So I was in Nepal and had a little trek coming down towards mountain, and this something was there, and I went there and I asked, who did this sign? It's like, madam, I did it with hand. It's like, wow. What amazed me is that the structure what he has followed is so well proportionate. He has actually made the point that my first line has to be like this, second line has to be like this, and God has to be big. A person who doesn't know typography, how did they see it? Their harmony works according to the business they want to sell. It is not about typeface, it is not about beautiful letters, it's about the purpose they want to achieve. And sometimes a beautiful piece comes out when you have that kind of a context. Another one of my favorite, this is a letterpress by William Morris. This design is William Morris. He's he's an English, he used to be an English punch cutter and a graphic designer, very well known. His designs are very intricate and textile based. The way he has written the letters, it actually resembles the person who is in the story. So his idea, again with the typography, is that if you attach that to a context, it becomes a part of it. Whether it's a letter, whether it's a font, or whether it's a calligraphy. This is an inscription in one of the church in Chennai. I went to Chennai and I was actually roaming around all those beautiful church they have. They are very old church, I'm talking about 14th century. And this inscription is actually in one of the oldest church in Chennai. Is it an E, R, a R and a D? It's kiosk? Do you think it's kiosk? No. Yes, yes. You can't read it. You can read it, but you do not know what it means. You can't understand it. Typography, is it something to be understand? Or letters to be understand? That's also a question. This is one of the sign in Goa. There was a dentist, like it's a tooth. I think it's a graffiti, and then it says it's a stamp vendor. And I was like, okay, this is such a good layout to see that how letters should not affect the visual. If you read what it says, it's a stamp vendor. It makes sense. And there is a denture. Why? I do not know. So does typography has any connection with the visual? If not, then it's a piece. It just integrates. It's an art. Whenever I see a piece like this, it's like, wow, where should I begin with? I mean, I need to find my doctor reference. Where is my doctor, what floor it is? And these are most interesting structure of actually layering typography. Either it's a building or a corporate office or a very old place where they have so many shops and they do not know where to go where, so they just put people name on it and then you just go play like little hide and seek here and there, find the place. No information, it's just this. Again, that is typography where you do not know what's happening, but it's there. I really like the way it was laid out, and then it says typing. What's the connection? Don't know. So maybe a person is typing the Xerox, doing a quick passport photos, and then doing, he's just doing a photos, he's not doing typing anything, but don't know why. So what's the balance here? Like what's the communication here between typing and the passport photo? Nothing. my God, I mean, like, I saw this and I said, like, what a piece of art. It wasn't a Marg magazine. If you know Marg, it's an art magazine, and this was about this Islamic art. And I don't know who has done it, but he has combined and made a Latinization of Arabic, or Urdu, I would say. I think it's Urdu, yeah. This is again typography. And what is this? Comes out from a person who wants to do a little bit of playing and experimenting between Urdu and English. An interesting piece, why? Because I do not know how many things this shop is selling. It has put everything out there. Again, so according to different contrast, different type, different proportion, different letters, it just integrated me to actually have a look what's happening on that board. It's all mixture. It's like a smorgasbord going on that shop. But people do that. Why? Just to attract, just to tell, okay, in my shop I have everything. So typography actually is very much related to business. For vendors, for traders, they do not know letters. They know how to attract people with those letters. So I do not know Kannada much, but I love this. This is a K letter K. And I started actually, if I want to learn Kannada, how would I do it? So I started lettering, right? Then I said, what if I mix the horizontal and the vertical and the counters or whatsoever, what goes in that letter? So I started mixing them, and this is what happened. So on every lettering curve or a piece, you will see a different top bar, a bottom and a medium. So it has a different counter. And when I see Kannada in environment outside near a shop, this is what I see. A colorful balance of letters around everywhere in the city. I love the shape. I do not know the shape, but what attracts me is the part where all the colors actually go together and they create a harmony in the typography. And what happens then when I start? Let's say I want to, I'm creating all this, having my archival and everything, and then what's the next step? So I started making a font out of it. So I take a signboard where it's a letter, it doesn't exist. So then I started making a typeface of that letter. So now I have a building as a letter, and then I have a typeface. I merge around with that, I play around with that. So how typography on the wall, can I see it my way, and can I use the balance, the harmony to create a new form out of it? So my how do you say, the expression or the emotions, what I see on the environment to portray into my work, this is what I started creating. So I started building the library of my own little letters and thinking, okay, so this is a proportion, so A letter, B letter, C letter, all from environment. So in short, I make it, I break it, I evolve, I process, I create, I define, I merge, and I reclaim. So that's chaos. And now you should exit. Right? Please make sure your seat is clean and you take your garbage with you. I hope you are reading, all of you are reading this when you're going to the station. No, yes. An interesting board which appeals me every time I go to a station. You should do this, but it never happens. So typography fails there because our trains are till shit. Alright, thank you everyone for listening to me and my typography kiosk. I hope you enjoyed my little nostalgia of around. Thank you.